Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. Most cabin rentals promise the same thing: peace, quiet, a break from the outside world. That's exactly what I wanted. 3 days. No phone calls, no emails, just a wood stove, a lake, and enough silence to finally clear my head. The cabin looked perfect in the listing. Remote, private, exactly 1 mile from the nearest road. The owner left one instruction in the welcome email: if you find the guest book, don't read the last page. I laughed when I read it. I assumed it was part of the cabin's rustic charm. By the end of the first night, I wished I'd listened. This happened during the late fall of 2023. I rented a small cabin deep inside a forest in northern Maine. The nearest town was almost 40 minutes away. No neighbors, no cell service, only one gravel road leading to the property. The key waited beneath a flat stone beside the porch, exactly where the owner said it would be. The cabin itself looked older than the photos. Hand-built log walls, a stone fireplace, 1 bedroom, 1 loft. Simple, comfortable. Inside, everything seemed normal. Firewood stacked beside the stove, fresh blankets, a handwritten welcome note. Near the fireplace, I noticed a thick leather-bound guest book. Hundreds of visitors had signed it over the years. Short messages, vacation memories, fishing stories, nothing unusual. Then I remembered the owner's email. Don't read the last page. Reasonable enough. Maybe it contained private information. At least, that's what I assumed. I ignored it, cooked dinner, started a fire, read a novel until almost midnight. Around 2:15 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy, one end of the porch, to the other, back and forth. The cabin had no curtains on the front window, only darkness outside. I stayed perfectly still, listening. After several minutes, the footsteps stopped. Morning arrived. Fresh snow covered the ground. I stepped outside expecting to see tracks. Nothing. The snow remained perfectly untouched. Not even my own footprints from the previous evening. I told myself fresh snowfall had covered everything. Reasonable explanation. Mostly. That afternoon, curiosity finally won. I opened the guest book again. The final page contained only one entry. My name, written in neat black ink. Below it, today's date. The handwriting wasn't mine. Neither was the message. It simply read, "You came back." I stared at the page for several seconds, then quickly flipped through the earlier entries. Everything else looked ordinary. When I returned to the final page, the writing had changed. Now it read, "Don't open the cellar." My stomach tightened. The cabin didn't have a cellar. At least, I hadn't seen one. That evening, while bringing in more firewood, I noticed something beneath an old rug near the kitchen. A square metal ring set into the floor. I pulled the rug aside. A wooden trapdoor. My pulse quickened. I hadn't noticed it before. The guest book rested on the kitchen table, still open. Another sentence slowly appeared beneath the first. "It hears the stairs." I closed the book immediately. Around sunset, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. I looked through the window. Nobody stood outside. The knocking came again. This time, from beneath the floor. 1 knock. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Directly below the trapdoor. I backed away. The wood stove crackled loudly. Then, went completely silent. The fire hadn't gone out. The flames simply stopped making noise. The entire cabin became unnaturally quiet. Then, the guest book turned a page by itself. No wind. No movement. It opened to the very last page again. A new sentence waited there. "It knows you read this." The knocking beneath the floor immediately stopped. Then, I heard footsteps. Not below me anymore. Inside the cabin. From the loft. Slow. Measured. Crossing the wooden floor above my head. I had never gone upstairs after sunset. I wasn't about to start. I grabbed my keys. My backpack. Opened the front door. The forest stood completely still. My car remained where I'd parked it. I drove away without packing anything else. The property disappeared behind the trees. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town. The next morning, I called the rental owner. He answered immediately. Before I explained anything, he quietly asked, "You read the last page?" I didn't answer. After a long silence, he sighed. "I tell everyone not to." Then he hung up. The rental listing disappeared from the website later that week. I searched for it several times afterward. Never found it again. Months later, a package arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was the leather guest book. Only one page remained. The last one. It contained a single unfinished sentence. "We'll see you." The rest of the page was blank. I burned the book that night. Or at least, I tried to. The leather never caught fire. I've stayed in hotels ever since. Busy ones. With neighbors. Bright hallways. Working cell service. Because somewhere in the woods, there's still a cabin. With an empty final page. Waiting for the next guest. To write a name they've never written before. When you stay in a remote cabin, you expect to hear strange noises. Branches scraping against the roof. Owls. Coyotes. The wind moving through the trees. Those sounds eventually become comforting. What doesn't become comforting is hearing someone splitting firewood. All night long. Not once. Not for a few minutes. From midnight until sunrise. Every single night. The strange part wasn't the sound. It was that. Every morning, the woodpile was exactly the same size. This happened during the winter of 2024. I rented an old hunting cabin deep inside the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The nearest paved road sat almost 8 miles away. The property belonged to an elderly couple who only rented it during the winter months. They warned me about heavy snowfall, frozen pipes, power outages, normal cabin problems, nothing else. The first day passed peacefully. I stocked the wood stove, cooked dinner, read beside the fire. Snow continued falling outside. By 11, the forest had disappeared beneath a thick white blanket. Just after midnight, I heard it. Thunk. A pause. Thunk. Another pause. Thunk. The unmistakable sound of an axe striking wood. It came from somewhere behind the cabin. Reasonable explanation? Another property nearby. Someone preparing firewood before another snowstorm. At least, that's what I assumed. The chopping continued. Steady. Unhurried. Exactly the same rhythm. One strike every 5 seconds. It never became faster. Never slowed down. Eventually, I fell asleep. Morning arrived. Bright sunlight reflected across the snow. I walked behind the cabin. An old chopping stump stood beside the woodshed. An axe rested neatly against it. The firewood pile remained untouched. Fresh snow covered everything. No footprints. No axe marks. Nothing. The following night, 12:03 a.m., the chopping started again. Thunk. 5 seconds. Thunk. 5 more. I grabbed my flashlight. Looked through the kitchen window. Moonlight illuminated the chopping block. The axe stood exactly where I'd seen it earlier. Perfectly still. Yet the sound continued. The following morning, I found something new. One freshly split log rested neatly on the porch. No footprints surrounded it. I carried the log inside. The wood felt strangely warm, almost as though it had just come from a fire. That afternoon, I asked the property owner whether anyone maintained the woodshed. He became unusually quiet, then asked, "Did you hear the chopping after midnight?" I hadn't mentioned the time. He sighed. Years earlier, before the property became a rental, the original owner spent every winter cutting firewood by hand. According to local stories, he refused to let anyone help, even during severe storms. One night, neighbors reported hearing his axe until sunrise. When they checked the cabin the next morning, the woodshed was full. The old man was nowhere to be found. Mostly, I returned to the cabin before dark, locked every door, covered every window, told myself I wouldn't pay attention to the sounds. At exactly 12:03, the chopping began again. Only this time, it sounded closer. Not behind the woodshed. Beside the porch. Thunk. 5 seconds. Thunk. 5 more. The sound slowly circled the cabin. From the porch, to the side wall, to the back door. Never stopping. Never changing rhythm. Then, it stopped. Complete silence filled the cabin. A soft voice drifted through the front door. "Need more wood?" I didn't answer. 3 slow knocks echoed against the porch. Then, another, and another, exactly matching the rhythm of the axe. I backed away from the door. The wood stove suddenly burned brighter, without anyone adding another log. Every piece of firewood stacked beside the stove shifted slightly, not falling, turning, as though every log had rolled, to face the front door. The knocking stopped. A few seconds later, the chopping resumed, farther away now, moving back into the forest. It continued until sunrise. The next morning, I opened the front door. A perfectly stacked pile of split firewood waited on the porch, exactly enough to fill the woodshed. Every piece looked freshly cut, balanced neatly. The axe rested on top. Its blade was clean. Wrapped around the handle was a strip of faded cloth. Embroidered into the fabric were 3 words: "Keep the fire." I left that afternoon, a full day earlier than planned. Months later, I received my security deposit back. Included with the check was a handwritten thank you note from the owners. Near the bottom, one sentence had been added in different handwriting. "The woodpile is full again." No signature. I never contacted them. I've stayed in plenty of cabins since. Modern ones. Vacation rentals. Places with neighbors nearby. But whenever I hear someone chopping wood after midnight, I don't look outside anymore. Because sometimes, the person keeping the fire alive finished that job a very long time ago. Every old cabin has one room people tell you not to use. Sometimes it's full of broken furniture. Sometimes the floor isn't safe anymore. Sometimes it's simply locked. The owner of the cabin I rented gave me exactly one instruction before handing over the keys. The upstairs bedroom stays locked. He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. I had no reason to go in there. Until I realized, every morning at sunrise, the locked bedroom door was standing open. The strange part wasn't that it opened. The strange part was, every day, there was something new inside. This happened during the fall of 2023. I rented a secluded log cabin in the mountains of western Montana. I planned to spend a week finishing a novel. No internet, no television, no distractions, just forests, rain, and silence. Exactly what I needed. The cabin had 2 floors. Downstairs held the kitchen, living room, and a small bathroom. Upstairs contained 2 bedrooms. One was fully furnished. The other remained locked with a heavy brass keyhole. The owner hadn't even given me a key. Reasonable enough. Probably used for storage. At least initially. The first evening passed quietly. I unpacked, started a fire, cooked dinner, read until almost midnight. Nothing unusual. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the upstairs window. I walked into the hallway. The locked bedroom door stood open. Only a few inches. I froze. I clearly remembered seeing it closed before bed. I pushed it open. Inside, the room was empty. Almost. An old wooden rocking chair sat beside the window. Nothing else. No bed. No closet. No decorations. Just one chair. I assumed the owner had entered while I slept. Perhaps another entrance existed. Reasonable explanation. Mostly. Before leaving for a hike, I pulled the door shut again. It clicked firmly into place. The second morning, the door stood open again. This time, the rocking chair remained, but an old framed photograph rested on the floor. Face down, I picked it up. The picture showed the cabin, taken decades earlier. Snow covered the roof. A family stood on the porch. Their faces had faded almost completely, except one. A young boy near the front steps smiled directly at the camera. Something about him looked familiar. I couldn't explain why. I placed the photograph back where I'd found it, closed the door, went downstairs. That evening, I heard the rocking chair, very softly, creak, pause, creak, pause. The sound came from upstairs. I grabbed my flashlight, walked slowly to the hallway. The bedroom door remained shut. The creaking stopped the moment I reached it. I returned downstairs. At exactly sunrise, the following morning, the door stood open again. The rocking chair, the photograph, and now, a small wooden toy train rested beneath the window. No dust covered it. It looked recently polished. My stomach tightened. Nothing else in the cabin ever moved. Only that room changed. Later that afternoon, I drove into town for groceries. The cashier noticed the cabin address on my receipt. He looked up. "You staying at the old Harper place?" I nodded. He quietly asked, "The upstairs room still locked?" I hadn't mentioned it. He stared out the window for a moment, then said, "Keep it that way after dark." He refused to explain. That night, rain hammered against the roof. The wind howled through the trees. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke to footsteps upstairs. Slow, measured, crossing the hallway. They stopped outside my bedroom. One floorboard creaked, then another. Someone or something walked away. I never opened my door. Morning arrived. Sunlight reached the upstairs hallway. The locked bedroom stood open once again. Inside, a small twin bed had appeared. Perfectly made. White quilt, old wooden headboard. The rocking chair rested beside it. The toy train now sat on the blanket. And the photograph had changed. The faces were clearer. The family looked almost perfectly visible now, including the little boy. I stared at the picture, then slowly realized why he looked familiar. He looked exactly like me, not as I was now, as I appeared in childhood photographs. I dropped the frame. The glass shattered. Behind the broken photograph, someone had written in faded pencil, "Welcome home." I packed immediately. Didn't bother cleaning. Didn't finish breakfast. Just loaded the car. As I reached the front porch, I looked back toward the upstairs window. The rocking chair moved gently. Back. Forward. Back. No one sat in it. I drove away. 2 weeks later, the cabin owner called. He asked only one question. "Did you ever go into the upstairs bedroom?" I hesitated, then admitted I had. A long silence followed. Finally, he quietly said, "I've never been able to keep that room empty." Before I could ask what he meant, he ended the call. Months later, while unpacking boxes after moving apartments, I found something inside one of my books. A photograph. The same family portrait from the cabin. The glass was intact. The image looked newer than before. The family still stood on the porch. Only now, there was one extra person, standing beside the little boy. Me, wearing the same clothes I'd been wearing during my stay at the cabin. I've never rented an isolated cabin again. Hotels are noisy. Neighbors can be annoying. Street lights ruin the stars. But I've come to appreciate all of those things. Because somewhere deep in the mountains, there's an old cabin with an upstairs bedroom that refuses to stay empty. And every morning, when the sun comes up, the door still opens, waiting for its next occupant.